Okay, hello everyone. Today we will be demystifying Lighthouse from User Experience Report and CrUX Vitals. And my name is Filip Rakowski. I'm CTO and co-founder of Vue Storefront. If you, for some reason, don't know what Vue Storefront is, and this is basically a bodiless frontend for headless e-commerce. So in the e-commerce, you have like a bunch of different technologies that specialize in different things, like CMSs, e-commerces, payment gateways. And in the headless commerce space, what we need is basically a head. This is why you could use Vue Storefront to connect to all types of e-commerce backends, no matter what if you're using Shopify, Magento, or whatever. You could use Vue Storefront for that. And Vue Storefront is open source, it's free. By the way, if you haven't given us a star, that's the right moment. You could also know me from Vue.js performance series that I'm writing on Vue School. Right now, I haven't written anything meaningful for quite some time, but maybe I will come back to this, but still there is a lot of knowledge in there. By the way, we are also recruiting. There is a job post for Vue Storefront in the job board, and that would be it about the announcements. Today, I will be speaking about one of my favorite topics, which is web performance, and to be more precise, performance measurement tooling. So there is a lot of misconceptions around that topic because the way how the performance is being measured these days is not straightforward. And yet people use these tools like Lighthouse, like PageSpeed Insights, without knowing exactly like how they work under the hood. And it's very easy to conclude false information from their output if you don't know in which environment this tool is using and how it is collecting the data. So let's explore this topic in depth. And believe me or not, but just 4 years ago, optimizing performance of web applications, it was something completely exotic. Like only a small group of developers knew how to measure it, and probably no one knew how to optimize it. Maybe just a few very specialized developers. Even though we already had some great tools to measure the performance, like Wiselow, which is on the screen, very, very old, yet very good audit. Even though we had those tools, most of us had no idea about their existence. And optimizing performance, it meant usually like following a bunch of best practices from some blog posts. For majority of us, maybe measuring the load event at best, but that's it. And only really big players where the impact of a single second was really like impacting the revenue, and the government websites were taking proper care of that. And the reason of that situation is rather simple. It was basically too hard for majority of developers to effectively measure performance. Also, the knowledge about the business impact of good or bad performance, it wasn't so common. And everything has changed in 2018 when Google introduced Google Lighthouse. It was first ever performance measurement tool that really aimed to simplify something that previously was very complex and hard to understand. At the same time, it started becoming obvious to everyone that the preferred way of navigating and using the web for majority of users is basically through mobile devices, so tablets and mobile phones. And as we know, they are less capable than desktop devices. So the need for a better performance was real. And this accelerated the popularity of term progressive web app, which was first introduced in 2015 by Alex Russell. And PWA's goal was to bring a better mobile browsing experience to all users, no matter what was their network connectivity and device capability. And one of the key characteristics promoted by these PWAs was speed. And of course, all of that was followed by a very aggressive evangelization from Google on events all over the world, webinars, basically everywhere. You were hearing about Lighthouse, performance, and benefits of PWA, especially in the e-commerce industry. So let's start today's talk with a deep dive into Google Lighthouse. And I could bet that most of you use that tool at least once in your professional career. Raise your hands. Like, I won't see this, but raise it for yourself. And it's hard to be surprised because this audit is actually available through browser extensions, through some external pages who are doing this audits. This is also available directly from the Chrome DevTools. So just click on the audit tab in the DevTools and run the test on any device. It's as simple as that. And this audit, it will give you a very detailed information on how well your page is performing against certain metrics. And these metrics aim to describe the real experience of your users as accurately as possible. And Lighthouse boils down performance of your website to a single number between 1 and 100. When score below 50 is treated as a bad, and score above 90 is treated as a good. But you could have a question like where all these magical numbers are coming from. So it turns out that each metric has its own weight that corresponds to the impact on overall experience of the end users. And as we can see here, if we'll improve our score, like if you want to improve our score, it will happen much faster if you will start with metrics like total blocking time, TBT, largest contentful pane, LCP, or cumulative layout shift. And if we focus on that, we'll have the biggest results, and then we can focus on other metrics. And of course, it's important to focus on all the metrics because each is describing the different piece that sums up to the overall experience of your users. But according to Google, some of the metrics are more important and are more impactful. Okay, so we know how the Lighthouse score is being calculated overall, but what we don't know is how the score of individual metrics, like this total blocking time, time to interactive, is being calculated. So how actually Google team knows that 1 second of total blocking time is a good or a bad result? So Google is using a real-world data collected by HTTP Archive. If you don't know what HTTP Archive is, I strongly suggest you to just check it out. It contains a lot of useful data about the web in general, collected from real users and crawlers that can help you understand, what is important and how your website performs against others in that field or others in general. But I'm warning you, some of the information you will find there can be really depressing. Like this, for example, you can learn that it's 2021 and the average amount of compressed, I repeat, compressed data JavaScript shipped by a web page is almost 450 kilobytes on mobile. That's a few megabytes of uncompressed JavaScript. And really, if you take a look at the chart, it's growing. Even though we're evangelizing, it's still growing. So for mid and low-end devices, it will result in a really, really bad experience. And a loading time that will allow you to make a coffee and still wait a few seconds until the website is ready is definitely not something that you're aiming for. Okay, going back to the main topic, just think about it. Based on the data for each metric from this HTTP archive, Google is setting the range for a good, medium, or bad score. Here we have example of time to interactive. And for each metric, the top 10% is perceived as a good result. The bottom 50% is bad. Sounds familiar? Yeah, it was the same with the Lighthouse score. And you could say that classifying only top 10% of all websites as good is not enough. But if you think a little, especially about the previous slide, you will quickly realize that majority of websites is just extremely, extremely slow. Hence, scoring in the bottom 90% of the range is treated as a bad or medium score. And your score in Lighthouse for each metric, individual metric, is determined by your position on the chart. So if you're on the top, you're getting 100%. If you're at the bottom, you're getting 0%. As simple as that. And there is one important thing, caveat regarding Lighthouse, everyone using it needs to be aware of. Both metrics and their weights change over time. Obviously, over time, Google team learns new things about the impact of certain metrics and behaviors on user experience. And periodically, they are updating the Lighthouse scoring algorithm. And with each version, the score more accurately measures the real-world impact of different metrics on user experience. And believe me, it's not easy to come up with a good metrics and weights because we can measure performance really from so many different perspectives and so many different angles And figuring out how each of them influences the overall experience is hard. It's hard, especially because it's subjective. Really, like some things are more important to others. Here's an example of the changes between Lighthouse 5 and 6. And as you can see, not only weight has changed, but also two metrics were replaced with new ones. Since Lighthouse 7, it seems that we have already established a good set of metrics to measure the overall performance, but the weights there are still being adjusted. And it's important to keep in mind that the score is changing over time, because let's say you benchmarked your website in 2018, and then you hire some agency to move into headless space, and they created you a very nice PWA, but over these 2 years, well, everything has changed. So if your performance score is bigger or lower, it doesn't tell you anything, because it could be an improvement in the application, but it could be also a change in the score. So this is why this kind of comparison doesn't make any sense, and it really happened to me. Like, we had a bunch of clients that actually did that. So always compare individual metrics, not the actual score, because the actual score can change over time, like the way how it's being calculated. And over time, Google identified 3 metrics that combined are kind of like a minimal set of measurements that is vital for the website performance. And they call them core web vitals. And Google describes them as quality signals, and that's the perfect description, actually, because there are no metrics that will tell you that, the website is delivering good or bad experience. And we should never follow them blindly. Each metric and testing tool is giving you signals about the quality of a website, nothing else. So we have 3 core web vitals. The first one is largest contentful paint, which measures that how long website takes to show the largest content on the screen above the fold. And it could be either an image, a link, a text field. And this metrics describes loading performance, because it tells you how long user needs to wait until the biggest part of the UI shows up on the screen. Oh, my cat is yelling. I hope you don't hear this. And if this definition is not telling you anything, let's see it on this example. So on the first image, we see that LCP is the image in the middle with Joe Biden and 2 other people, and that it appears on the 5th frame. Assuming each frame is 1 second, our LCP is 5 seconds. On the image below, we see our LCP after 3 seconds. And good LCP is below 2.5 seconds, and bad is above 4 seconds. So it's better to stick below 2.5. Another metric that measures the responsiveness of the website is first input delay. In short words, it's the time that user needs to wait until they see first response of their action. I'm sure you saw that many times. You're entering the website, you're clicking on the link that appears in the viewport, but the website is still being loaded. So you have to wait a little bit until navigation happens. That's exactly the first input delay. It happens only if you have a long tasks occupying the main thread for more than 100 milliseconds. Then if the user clicks on something, they need to wait for that task to finish. And good first input delay value is below 100 milliseconds, because according to studies, 100 milliseconds is the threshold for perceived instant response. After the threshold, users will notice that the action was delayed. So 100 milliseconds is something you should aim for. And the last but not least metric is cumulative layout shift, which measures visual stability. It basically tells you if there are any changes in the layout during loading process. And cumulative layout shift usually happens when you don't have placeholders for the parts of the UI that are loading dynamically, like images in image tag or some external text, sometimes buttons. Here we see an example of the layout shift. And the good score for CLS is when less than 10% of your layout shifts during the loading process. And please keep in mind that this is only about the above the fold content. So 3 core web vitals, they are like minimum set of quality signals for a good perceived performance measuring loading performance, page interactivity, and visual stability. And like it's already a huge step forward, since we had Lighthouse 1, when we had a very naive understanding on like what matters the most in good user experience, but there is still room for improvement, without a doubt. For example, Lighthouse audit, it will not show you the difference between single-page applications and multi-page applications. So even though the former has much faster in-app navigation, so even if we'll have a single-page application and multi-page application with exactly the same scores, the user experience on the single-page application will always be better. Lighthouse will not catch it. Also, Lighthouse poll will not tell you how well your website is performing under heavy loads or how good the client-side caching is. But no, that's all we have right now, and it's definitely better than nothing. There is one problem. If you run a Lighthouse audit locally, like from the Chrome DevTools, on different devices, will almost always have a different scores, because it's influenced by your computing power, network connectivity, and they can be influenced by things like browser extensions, some tabs in the background, etc. So browsing in incognito will help with the extensions, but will not eliminate the problem of having completely different devices. And if you want to continuously monitor your performance for each release or even each pull request, I suggest hosting the Lighthouse environment locally. So we are always running on the same environment with the same load, and using Lighthouse CI, which is available as a GitHub action. It's a great tool that will automatically run Lighthouse audit on each pull request. And it will give you a detailed view of the score, how it changed from the previous version and how it changes over time. And you will see immediately if a certain version or a pull request contributes to better or worse performance. Okay, but this solution is not perfect, because the fact that your website is running great in your controlled environment only means that it runs great in your controlled environment. So if you are testing on a high-end iPhone or MacBook Pro, you can usually expect good results. But not all your users will have high-end devices and good internet connection. So there are two types of data. One is called lab data, and this is what Lighthouse is giving you and what we were discussing until now. It's a data that comes always from a controlled environment, like your computer or some external machine, if you are having Lighthouse CI. There's also another type of data called field data that, as name suggests, comes from the field, or as image suggests, comes from the wild. And this is provided by real-world users. And lab data is mostly useful for debugging. As we saw previously, we can see if there was an improvement or regression in certain metrics. We can also so easily reproduce the results. The problem is that it gives us no information about the real-world bottlenecks. This is where field data shines. So why lab data is not enough? To illustrate why we need both lab data and field data, I want to show you two real-world examples from audits. So what we see on this image is on the top, we are having Lighthouse score. On the bottom, we are having the score that was used to calculate the Lighthouse score. And in the middle, we are seeing the field data. So even though the Lighthouse score is terrible, and even though the metrics of the synthetic run lab data are terrible, like 80 or 90% of the users is experiencing a great performance. And this is why they are not optimizing. Because even though in the lab tests, the website is not performing very well, probably majority of the users is using either like a very fast internet connection or having high-end devices. So don't really need to spend money on optimizing this. And here we have the opposite situation. So even though Lighthouse score is decent, majority of the users is experiencing bad or like mediocre performance. So as you see, lab data is clearly not enough information to determine if page is doing good or bad, and where we could find this, this treasure of field data. And so Google launched something called Chrome User Experience Report. And that's exactly what the name suggests. So it's a report of real-world user experience among Chrome users. And Google is collecting 4 of the performance metrics each time you visit a website and send this to the CrUX database. So like you have to check some things in the settings of the browser, but they are by default turned on. So until you turn it off, you are sending this data to the CrUX. And also to have this data available on your website, the page needs to be crawlable. And this data from the Chrome User Experience Report is available in PageSpeed Insights, Google BigQuery, and Chrome User Experience Dashboard in Data Studio. And I really highly encourage you to check out the latter because you can do a lot of amazing stuff in the Data Studio. You can generate reports about exact devices, user groups, or metrics, and they are looking really good. Today, we will talk about the former one, which is PageSpeed Insights. So PageSpeed Insights. PageSpeed Insights is a performance measurement tool that runs the Lighthouse performance audit on your website, but also shows you its field data collected from the Chrome user report. So we are having like both. We're having both live data and field data in the same report. And it's essentially an audit tool that gives you all the required information to determine if your website is performing good or bad. And lab data is the one, is like the Lighthouse score itself. And it's the one that Lighthouse score is being calculated from. This is why you shouldn't really focus that much on improving this part. I mean, it's useful for debugging, as we already said, but it's just an indicator. And the difference between regular Lighthouse audit and PageSpeed Insights Lighthouse audit is that the testing is being performed on the Google data centers instead of your computer. So if you're running this locally from the DevTools, you are performing this on your PC. If you are running this from PageSpeed Insights, you are performing this on the Google data center. And the website is usually using the data center that is closest to your location, but sometimes it could use another one if the closest one is under heavy load. This is why you could encounter a situation when you are running an audit 2 times for the same website, one after another, and you're having completely different results. Of course, there are much more factors influencing that, but that could be one of the reasons. That's another reason not to put a lot of focus into lab data, actually. And all the tests that are running on the mobile version are being performed on Motorola Moto G4, which is a typical mid-range mobile device. So as long as all your users are not using it, it's not going to be a realistic simulation. What really matters is the field data, and it's collected from the last 28 days. So if you did an update, you will need to wait a whole month to see if there was improvement or not. I will speed things up a little bit because I already exceeded time. Don't be mad at me. So yeah, you need to wait a whole month to see if there was an improvement or not. But the lab data, it shows immediately, if something has changed or not. So to summarize, when using PageSpeed Insights, always look at the field data when looking for meaningful real-world information, and use lab data if there was one improvement immediately after you made the changes or regression. Now, something we've all been waiting for, because I think almost no one really knows what is the impact of Core Web Vitals on SEO, because it's a pretty new thing, and I'm hearing a lot of false information even from people knowledgeable on that space, because there was also some changes to the initial plan. So, do Core Web Vitals affect SEO? The short answer is yes. Performance and Core Web Vitals affect SEO, but right now it influences only the mobile search results and takes into account only data collected from mobile devices. Most likely it will be a thing for desktop devices as well at some point, but it's not now. And also, only field data matters. So this is what you should optimize if you want to have a SEO boost. And if there's one thing that you would, take out from this talk, is focus on field data. Really, don't care about Lighthouse score. And now, how it works in depth. So Google is looking at each of the 4 collected metrics separately, because the field data is being collected only for 4 metrics. And if 75 percentile of a given metric is good, then you're getting SEO boost from this particular metric. And if not, you're just not getting the SEO boost. There's no penalty But of course, like, assuming that everyone are having this SEO boost, not having it could be treated as a penalty. So in this example, we will have an SEO boost from first input delay, largest contentful paint, and cumulative layout shift, but we will not have it from first contentful paint. And like, that's it. It's as simple as that. This is how it works. And I could end here, but there is one more thing I want to share with you. I really love using this slide. So as some of you know, we are using Nuxt in Vue Storefront, and if you don't know, educate yourself. And we are thankful for the Nuxt team for the hard work, especially with Nuxt 3. It's amazing. And Vue Storefront wouldn't be so great without Nuxt. So that's why from today, we are proud sponsor of Nuxt.js. It's in our interest as a Vue community to make sure that all creators in our ecosystem are well-funded. And most of the enterprise software we are making money on is powered by open source maintainers for free. So I think it's a fair deal to share with them some of the money you earned on their product to let them continue supporting your business. So I encourage all of you to find at least one open source contributor or project and become its sponsor, even with $5 a month. Like, small things matter at scale, and we're definitely talking about the scale. That's all. Thank you very much.